Hi, everybody. Today I'm sharing my screen with Shelby Owens. Hi, Shelby. How are you?
Hi, doing good, Jordy. How are you?
Fine. No snow today.
We've got a lot.
I know. That's quite a difference between Barcelona, Spain, and Arkansas, USA.
Exactly. Yep. Big difference.
So Shelby works for Chargeguard, which is a vendor cost recovery service. Basically, they take your chargebacks under your vendor account and they fight to get your money back so you can get well, it's works like a kind of the FBA reimbursement service, like, well, kind of like how Cell Investigators works. I don't know if you know the company, but if you are familiar with this YouTube channel, we just interviewed Juana at Carbon 6 and we discussed how Cell Investigator works. So ChargeGuard is like the same, but for vendor accounts, for one Amazon 1P retail accounts. And Shelby is going to introduce the company and make a quick workaround on how they work and how can we perform a free audit and the next steps after the free audit. So you're leading this, Shelby.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jordy. And yeah, it's a really good comparison between us and the FBA side of things. But the fees are a little bit different, right? So when you think about what ChargeGuard manages, it's specific to chargebacks, shortages, and price claims. I'll walk through a deck here in a second. And when I say shortages, that's going to be inclusive of the actual shortage, the quantity variance, and then also the price claim, so the purchase price variance. So that's included in both. And then when I talk about the chargebacks, that's specific to the non-compliant fees with Amazon, which we'll talk more about here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Great. So just a quick question so the audience can get a quick idea on how much money can you recover from an average vendor account. Let's say a vendor account that's doing $2 million US a year.
Yeah, if you think about what these fees average, actually, let me just go ahead and pull it up because that's, I think, one of the first slides we've got here is when you think about these fees, they average 4 to 18% of what the vendor sends to Amazon. So you've got, everything with Amazon vendors and negotiation. So you've got preset allowances. This is not an allowance. This is, like I said, directly cutting out of that profitability with Amazon. And so if you, bring up the $2 million size business, let's assume that their fees fall into this 4 to 18%. Most fall, I think, around, it's like 5.96%, something like that. And so of that then 2 million, 6% of those are fees. Of that 6%, on average, ChargeGuard recovers about 70%. Now that's blended across chargebacks and shortages. When we go into the details, what you'll realize, or what our vendors always find out, is more often than not with the chargebacks, those are the non-compliant fees, the vendor's actually at fault. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's because there are so many areas where they have to be compliant with Amazon and with those guidelines that they're given. And so what we do there is some in the recovery, because if there's an erroneous chargeback, I'm not saying they don't exist, then we'll likely see some recovery on it. But more often than not, the value that we add for that is in the mitigation, is in identifying the root cause and providing an education and being able to see those fees drop off. And so when I talk about the 70%, that's including some chargebacks where it's lower recovery. But then on the flip side, you also have the shortages included in this. And like I mentioned, that's the purchase quantity and the purchase price variance. And here, more often than not, Amazon's at fault. And so it's a different story. So this is really about the recovery and us being able to go after those dollars and just exhaust all resources and take them through dispute after dispute after dispute to make sure that we're getting a return on those shortages. Okay. And so that's average 70% of an average 5%, 6% on their size of business.
So it's quite a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And so actually what it's totaled, you can see the bottom here, it says in 2020 and in 2021, Amazon fees, just the chargebacks and shortages, totaled about $13 billion. And that is across the 2 years. And that's just for vendor. It's just for vendor.
That's crazy. So basically they are financing Amazon retail using your money.
Arguably, yeah, arguably, for sure. So, and when vendors ask about, well, why does this happen? That's really what this slide is speaking to, is why is this such a problem, right? And there's going to be fees on every retailer. We see them across all retailers, but the reason Amazon's fees are just so much more, they're dominating so much more, is because of Amazon's ability to build the scale, right? They're Amazon. Amazon is Amazon. Everybody knows who Amazon is. Everybody shops on Amazon. So when you think about how fast they had to build to kind of catch up with that demand, they have to rely on automations. They're so heavily reliant on automations, but these automations are making mistakes. So when you think about where shortages occur, and again, this is the fee type where more often than not, Amazon's at fault. And it's actually not even a fee, it's just a deduction, it's a withholding. When Amazon takes in your inventory, when they take in a vendor's inventory, they break it down into sellable units. And again, this is automated. And so during that breaking down process and that intake process, the automation doesn't weigh something properly, or it doesn't scan a barcode, or it falls off a conveyor belt, or it's stolen. There's a million reasons why it could not be checked in. And that is when the shortage occurs. And then for a period of time after the invoice due date, Amazon has a smart match. So it's basically a second automation, checking the first automation and saying, listen, I know that we built a scale, we've got automated processes. Let me go ahead and do some due diligence and let me check to make sure that all this inventory that we said was not shipped in actually wasn't. And this is why it's so painful when you think about the accounts receivable side of Amazon. When you look at the invoices, during this due diligence process, they're chipping away at that shortage amount, but every time they chip away at it, because they find inventory, it creates a new invoice, and then they chip away and it creates a new invoice. And so it can be a nightmare to understand, what did I actually get paid and what am I actually still owed? And so we're kind of coming in and solving this problem for vendors as far as the understanding of these fees.
That's great. Let me grab just one of your ideas, is that, well, Amazon, it's 90% automation. And sometimes we rely so much on them that we forget that, Amazon sometimes up things. Yeah. So, for example, I work with a lot of sellers, and sometimes they just lose a whole shipment. Or there was this case, and a friend of mine, they lost a whole truck full of, let's say, electronic equipment. A whole truck. How can you lose a whole truck full of products? Yeah. And sometimes they just mess up things, and and sometimes there's people stealing things as well. Absolutely.
And that's a pain point too, what you just mentioned when you talk about Amazon's freight, is especially for vendors where they're collect. So Amazon's using their own freight. Amazon does not take ownership over your product until it hits their warehouse, regardless if they're using their own trucking or not. And so some vendors that are collect are like, no, you can see here, this bill of lading, this proof of delivery, it went to you. Isn't that where your ownership takes over? And it's not the case. They do not take ownership until they start that receive process, regardless how it gets to their warehouse. And that can be extremely frustrating for some vendors.
I know. I've been there sometimes. Even some vendor clients have taken pictures before shipping using Amazon's carrier. And then they're like, I don't know where the products are, so it's not my fault. And then you have to fight with them, and it's so time consuming and so frustrating.
So time consuming. Yeah, you're spot on. So to kind of progress through this a little bit, what Chargeguard does is, we mentioned time consuming. We take over the entire dispute process for vendors, for the chargebacks, for the shortages, and for the price claims. And so what this looks like is ongoing management from our data partnership moving forward. So fully taking over that dispute process for these fee types. And then also, for dependent on the fee, typically this is for shortages and price claims, we're able to actually also look back 5 years. So we kind of take on this simultaneously. We do this historic approach while we're managing the account ongoing, so vendors completely come off of it and do not have to dedicate those resources and spend all of that time and investment of that time and money and whatever it may be on fighting these claims and on clawing back these dollars that are rightfully theirs. That's what we're doing for them. And we've built the tool and built the technology and staffed up our team to be able to support this for our vendor partners.
Right. Do you know if there's a different time frame for Europe? You said 5 years in the USA.
Correct.
Is it 2 years in Europe or 5 years as well?
It's 5 years as well. Same for the
Mhm.
shortages and price claims. And that's, in the current marketplaces where we're at, which is quite a few in Europe, we've seen it to be able to go back 5 years. So as of right now, no differences, as long as the business goes back that far,
Mhm.
then we're able to claw back those dollars.
So cool. Yeah.
Good question. Really quick to jump into who Chargeguard is, what we do. I know I spoke to the recovery, I spoke to the mitigation, but this kind of sums it up really pretty for vendors to be able to see. So the first thing, this is our 5 pillars. This is really the core of what Chargeguard is doing and what the problem that we're solving for vendors. So the first thing is recovery of fees, right? We talked about our 70% blended across chargebacks and shortages. And so here again, it mentions the 5-year ability for us to be able to go back. This is the core of what we do, right? This is the exciting, this is the recovery, this is the management. But then there's also, like I mentioned when we started, there are fees that are not maybe recoverable. Maybe we need to provide more education so we can mitigate this fee type because the vendor was at fault. And I'll jump to the third pillar really quickly. That's the root cause analysis. So as much as recovery is extremely exciting, there's also an extremely exciting portion of what Chargeguard does and what we're avoiding from ever happening in the first place. And we've seen so much success doing this for our vendors. It's been really exciting to see their fees decrease so significantly as their business is growing on Amazon, and it's getting them in a much healthier spot, regardless of the recovery that we've done. And so that's such a big part of what we do. And that is specific to the chargebacks, because like I said, more often than not, the vendor is at fault. We also have a certified recovery specialist. So this essentially just means you've got one dedicated person to your team that's going to be able to be that point of contact. So you don't have to work with somebody from our open statement team and somebody from our initial dispute team and somebody from our chargeback team. You're going to have one person that's going to be the liaison between everything that we're doing and your business. And it's an extremely valuable piece to have just when you think about the time management that vendors need to put into this, which is not a lot. It's extremely hands-off, but when they do need to work with us, they've got that point person.
That's great.
The final two are visible dispute activity. So this is just one of the pillars is basically saying you have the ability to see what's going on, what's pending, denied, approved, and how much we've recovered. But then we take it a deeper level to our 5th pillar, which is Chargeguard Insight, which is a tool that we have built to be able to support narrative storytelling data, which makes it so much easier to understand. So I'll give you an example. If a vendor launches a new product, and let's say it's a liquid product, because chargebacks go all the way down to the product type, because some of them require more prep and require bubble wrap and a different box size and multitude of reasons. But let's say a vendor launches a liquid product and they want to understand what the chargebacks are going to be and what types of chargebacks they're going to see on this product and what type of box sizing they need to use, and maybe what fulfillment center is causing them the most issues. They can launch the product, go look in Chargeguard Insight, if they want to give it a month, 2 months, 3 months, they can look back and say, okay, at this ASIN, they can filter down to the ASIN level. At this fulfillment center, here's where we're seeing is the biggest problem area for us. And so it allows them to take these narrative insights and the storytelling format and actually make these intentional business decisions based on these fees. And the reason that's so important is because these fees impact businesses. They impact the profitability to the tune of, like we started with, 4 to 18%. So it's a big deal.
Okay. So what's the meaning of storytelling? Is that how you present the information?
Correct. Yeah. So it's updated every single day at 7 a.m. Central Time. And what we are able to do is when you log in, you've got this visibility to just an overall view, and it's called the news feed. And so you can see recovery activity and dispute activity that's going on. You can see shortage information and you can see chargeback information. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull in the most relevant update. So for shortages, before you even click explore into it, it's going to show you an interesting blurb here. Actually, let me jump down a few slides because I've got what that looks like. So here's what that looks like. Here's the summary, the news feed. What they're able to see here is, let's talk about shortages, right? So it's gonna pull in the data and it's gonna generate a story based on the data. So here it says 508,000 were the shortages last month. So during the last month, the total shortage amount changed. The prior period has been 259,000. The change in the average shortage is 5.9 thousand from the prior period. And so it's just giving insights based on the fees that we're pulling in and the data that we're pulling in. For chargebacks here, you see for the last month, the total chargeback change, the prior period was 36,000. Chargebacks for the prior period were driven primarily by this type with a financial charge of 36,000 and this type with a financial charge of 21,000. And so it's able to pull in the data and see, okay, what are the two top drivers of these chargebacks? Okay, it's prep bagging and it's PO on time. Let's put those in here because that's an important metric. And then when you click explore into this, it takes you to a much deeper level and you can change the view. You can, instead of looking at the last month, which is this current view, you can look at the last or this day, week, month, quarter, year. And then the story adjusts based on the time that you change to.
Okay, got it.
It's pretty exciting and been pretty valuable for our vendors to just kind of keep their finger on the pulse of the business. So with that being said, the best part, my favorite part about Chargeguard, even though I'm biased, of course, but I love it, is that we start with a free audit. So we've got all of these incredible reasons why somebody should want to partner, but to make it even better and to make it even sweeter, we have a free audit to first show the visibility. And so this is what our audit actually looks like. And what we're able to do is we pull 5 years of the shortages and 1 year of the chargebacks, and we bring you, based on those fees, a Chargeguard recovery potential. And so what this is speaking to is, of the total fees, not all of those are recoverable. Some of those had to have been disputed within 30 days if they're a chargeback. And if they're not, they become lost opportunity and they're expired. So we show, how much went into the bucket of lost opportunity, what's still available. We look at the 5 years of the shortages because luckily we can still recover that amount. And we show the quarter over quarter trends. And it's extremely value added for our vendors to get this idea, see what their fees are, right? We said the 4 to 18% at the beginning, they can see where they fall, and then understanding, okay, now that I've got the information and the opportunity, does it make sense to partner with Chargeguard or does it not?
Okay, so I guess the lost chargebacks is the gray part.
Yes, correct. So what we're showing here is, I'll actually jump into this. It's taking that one and blowing it up a little bit bigger. So what we've got here is, this is when we were still running 2-year audits. Now we are doing 5-year audits. And so this is just 2. So what we've got is about $80 million in total invoices for this vendor across that 2 years. Then we look at their outstanding fees, their total shortages outstanding, which if they are recovering, I know this vendor because they partnered with us and they were not recovering anything or even disputing anything. But if they were disputing shortages and seeing a return on those, we would not include it here. We're just showing what's left. And so their total fees left outstanding was about $7 million. And then, so when you look at the invoices and the 7 million, it's about 9%. And that's, again, when we talk about that 4 to 18, that's where they fall. And then we show a fee breakdown. So what percent is coming from chargebacks? What percent is coming from shortages? And then this is where we talk about that lost opportunity. So when you look at this total fees of this 7.19 versus our total potential recovery, there's a big difference there. So we want to identify why. And so if you look at, I always start with shortages. I think it's easier for vendors to understand. We just show the total shortage amount outstanding, which is here 2.7 million. And then we bring a potential recovery based on averages across our different steps to our dispute process. So we have 3 different steps to our process. And so we're able to kind of identify what's the average recovery and plug that in. For chargebacks, it's different. So we show the total chargeback amount, and then we show this bucket of lost opportunity. And for this vendor, because we were having these conversations, I know that this lost opportunity was all chargebacks they never disputed. And because of that 30-day window, they can no longer go after that. And that's for them about over $3 million of fees just in 1 year that they can't go after.
I would kill myself. It's $3 million. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And that's 1 year, right? We're not looking at any additional year. And I know that through conversation, we talked with them. They were not disputing these. They didn't have the resources at the time, and they didn't want to staff up and do it. They rather just pay somebody else to do it. And so it made a lot of sense. But this was a pain point. And this is why we show this, to be able to look at what are you proactively avoiding by partnering with somebody that has staffed up to be able to dispute all of your chargebacks and shortages. And I say that also because if I'm talking to vendors, I talk to vendors every single day. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, they don't dispute all of their chargebacks because it doesn't make sense for them to. Because like I said earlier, more often than not, the vendor's at fault with the chargebacks. And so where they should spend their time on the chargebacks is understanding the fee and understanding why they were charged these and trying to mitigate it moving forward, instead of spending the time and money and the resources on disputing it just to get it denied because it's not erroneous. It's a valid fee. And so it's not uncommon to see this lost opportunity and have this be a huge pain point for most vendors, because if you're going to dispute anything, dispute your shortages, because you're going to see a better return.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas we do both. So it's kind of, let us come in, take it over, and you won't see this lost opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's the first slide of our audit. I'm not going to go through this word for word, but this is the second slide where we essentially do a cost benefit analysis, and we show you in-house management versus utilizing Chargeguard. And then our final slide is just next steps, action items. Where do we go from here? And so I want to quickly, I know we talked a little bit about Chargeguard Insight. I want to jump to how we get started with the audit, because I know we got to be time conscious here. So our audit is, we are happy to have a conversation prior and just kind of take you through our demo and explain our product a little bit more. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. You can also just email us and you can set up with the audit prior to having a conversation. But here's where you can go. So the first thing is going to the chargeguard.co/Jordi Ordonez. So who got on here? This will take you, and you'll have a couple options here. You'll be able to set up a meeting directly with me through one of the links on that website. And if you don't want to have a meeting and you'd rather just go straight to the audit, then you're able to click and it'll send us an email, and you can say, hey, don't have a meeting, but would love to get the audit started, and we'll be able to tell you that what we need to get that going. The next thing is registering. So once we have that conversation, or once you tell us we want to go ahead and get the audit, we'll tell you what we need for permissions. It's extremely simple. It's contributor access to 4 different buckets. And we'll send you a confirmation once we get the invitation, and our audits take a week to get back. Once we get that audit back, actually, once we send the confirmation to you that it's in progress, we'll go ahead and set up some time to review the results. And we'll do that for about a week later. Like I said, our audits take a week to get back, and we'll go through it and we'll align on cost, and we'll make sure all things look good. And then from there, we move forward and we start getting your dollars back.
Great. How much time can it take to get your money back? I mean, this is not as fast as Seller Central. I mean, you don't have you don't have the MWS access, so you can pull all the data and start recovering some things in autopilot. So
that's correct. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I'll stop share just so it's you and I on here. When you think about timelines, we always say plan from the data partnership moving forward. So for the ongoing fees that are newer, plan for dollars to start flowing in around month 2, because we're initiating disputes, the date of the partnership. Amazon takes within about 30 days to respond. And then if it's approved, they typically take within another 30 days to pay it back. And so we're typically around month 2, and that's for the ongoing. And then you'll see those dollars flowing into the account. For the historic, this takes typically about 12 months. So we submit it we aim for month 3, give or take a few, just depending on the size of the business and the history there. And then it takes about 6 to 9 months to see the maximum payout from Amazon. But with our vendors, we do have 12-month agreements in place to account for the historic work that we're doing and then the ongoing.
Okay. And last but not least, this is the funny question of the interview. So you have lots of types of Amazon chargebacks, like import PO on time non-compliance, prep issues, PO on time accuracy, no show. What is the most stupid chargeback you have found on your
Ooh,
audits?
that's a good question. I would say I've heard a couple different opinions from different people in this space. For me, the I would say PO on time accuracy. There's three subtypes of that. There's not on time, down confirmed, and not filled. Two of the subtypes, the penalty is 3% the cost of the product. One of the subtypes, the penalty is 10% the cost of the product. And this can be extremely painful for vendors. And what we see is that this sometimes can be erroneous. I mean, so we see really great recovery on these types, just depending on how vendors are doing things. But I feel like that is the most frustrating, but also the best one to avoid. And I have also heard the same from somebody that works in a company that does data. Their least favorite is the ASN accuracy, and they think that there's a lot of opportunity for those to be non-existent. And so I'd say those two for sure. But PO on time is definitely, I'd say, the most frustrating. And keep in mind, with PO on time, and as well as a few other chargeback types, because if you think about the shortages and how they occur, and that it's through Amazon's automated receive, when you have some chargebacks that can interfere with Amazon's receive, so on-time issues or boxing issues or labeling issues, these actually increase the risk that a shortage will occur. And so it's kind of duplicate fees, and it's really painful. But on the flip side, when we're able to help mitigate some of those fee types and see those drop off, then you're going to see a duplicative effect across your shortages as well. So it can be painful how they're related, but I would say that's my least favorite.
Okay. So in your experience, is it worth it to have someone inside the vendor company fighting those chargebacks? Or
Oh my gosh. Yeah, 100%, 100%. If you think about the chargebacks, especially because like I mentioned a minute ago, if most of the vendors that I talk to aren't actively disputing their chargebacks, because it can seem like a waste of time. And so let somebody come in and dispute them, and then provide visibility and help mitigate them, and kind of do all of that. And then same for the shortages here, vendors would likely dispute these over their chargebacks, but you're having to staff up and claw back dollars that are rightfully yours, right? And so why do that? And the greatest thing about Chargeguard is we're paid based on the success that we see. Everything's a commission of recovery. And so if you have somebody that you hire, or multiple people that you hire to do this in-house, you're paying them regardless of the success. Whereas Chargeguard, it's just success-based.
Okay. So how many people does work at Chargeguard?
We've got about, oh gosh, that's a good question.
Because you work on remote and maybe you don't know.
I know, no, it's a large team. I want to say there's over 25 people that we've got on our team doing active disputes, managing these processes, and that's growing almost daily.
And how many disputes can you manage a day?
All of them.
No, I mean, yeah, but the number, it's like 100, 300, 500. I mean, the whole team.
Thousands. It's thousands. I think, if you look at that audit that I just shared a minute ago, let me go ahead and I'm just going to go look at it in reference. For the 2-year time frame we were looking at, 2 years of shortages, there was about 2,600 shortages. And if you look at the chargebacks, in just 1 year, there's about 78,000 chargebacks. So if you think about disputing, it's in the thousands, and that's for one account. So that is one account. So times that by 100, and that's what we're currently managing.
Right. So thanks a lot, Shelby. That was so cool. I mean, I'm not an expert on vendor accounts or chargebacks, and this was really, really useful for me. And
so glad.
I hope it's really useful for the audience as well. And well, if you want to drop Shelby an email, I'll make sure to leave a link on the video description so you can contact them. And I always recommend having a previous meeting before giving access to the account, so she can show you how Chargeguard works and show you a proper demo.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And my email is shelbyo@chargeguard.co. So it's very catchy. So rhymes, memorable.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot, Shelby. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordy.
See you. Take care.
Bye.